The numbers are catastrophic. Western intelligence agencies just confirmed what the Kremlin has been desperately trying to hide from its own people. Russia is losing over 1,180 soldiers every single day, killed or wounded so badly they can never return to combat. That's not Ukrainian propaganda. That's not Western exaggeration. Those are conservative estimates based on verified obituaries, funeral announcements, and Russian government records that independent journalists have painstakingly compiled. To put this in perspective, Russia is approaching 1 million total casualties since the invasion began. 1 million young Russian lives destroyed, families shattered, entire communities devastated. And for what? For less than 4,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory gained in all of 2024. The math is staggering. Russia sacrificed approximately 103 soldiers for every single square kilometer of land they managed to seize. That's not a military campaign. That's a meat grinder. That's desperation disguised as strategy. But here's what makes this moment truly unprecedented. The Russian people are finally starting to see through the lies. Behind the Kremlin's carefully orchestrated propaganda, something is breaking. The economic data tells a story that Putin cannot spin away. Russia's ruble just collapsed to its lowest level in over 2 years. Inflation is spiraling out of control. The economy that Putin claimed was resilient is now showing cracks everywhere you look. Independent economists are calling it what it is: an economy overheating from the strain of unsustainable war spending. Moscow is pouring everything into weapons production while ordinary Russians face skyrocketing prices for basic goods. The Kremlin's options to stabilize the situation are described as limited and dangerous. Every move they make to prop up the ruble risks triggering deeper inflation, capital flight, or outright recession. They're trapped in a vicious cycle of their own making. And the Russian people feel this every single day. Grocery prices climbing week after week. Savings evaporating. Financial uncertainty becoming the new normal. The gap between what state television tells them and what they experience in their daily lives is becoming impossible to ignore. When people can't afford food while the government claims everything is going according to plan, trust begins to crumble. Now let's talk about what's happening on the battlefield, because the reality is nothing like what Russian state media portrays. Western military analysts have documented how Russian forces are being systematically destroyed in grinding assaults that achieve almost nothing. Entire brigades thrown into attacks that move the front line by barely a few kilometers, if at all. The scale of death is unprecedented in modern warfare. Here's a statistic that should shock everyone. In November 2024 alone, Russia suffered its single bloodiest month of the entire war. Not in 2022 when the invasion started. Not in 2023 during Ukraine's counteroffensive. In November 2024, nearly 3 years into this conflict, Russian casualties hit their peak. That tells you everything you need to know about the trajectory of this war. Russia isn't getting stronger. Russia is bleeding out. Villages across Russia are being hollowed out. Multiple men from the same small communities killed in the same meaningless assaults. Industrial towns lose their skilled workers. Families receive death notifications while the Kremlin insists casualties are minimal. Independent Russian journalists risking their freedom have verified over 80,000 individual deaths by name. And that's just what they can confirm through open sources. The real number is certainly much higher. But the crisis facing Russia goes far deeper than battlefield losses. The country is experiencing a catastrophic brain drain that will cripple it for generations. Hundreds of thousands of Russia's most educated citizens, IT specialists, engineers, doctors, entrepreneurs, scientists, have fled the country since the invasion began. These aren't dissidents or criminals. These are the exact people Russia needs for innovation, modernization, and economic recovery. Think about what this means. Russia is losing the future. An estimated 500,000 to 1 million people have left, many of them young professionals in their most productive years. They're not coming back. They're building new lives in Kazakhstan, Armenia, Georgia, Turkey, and European countries that welcome skilled workers. Russia is being drained of human capital at exactly the moment when it needs those people most. Why are they leaving? Fear of mobilization is one reason. Disgust with the war is another. But fundamentally, people are voting with their feet because they believe Russia has no future under current leadership. When your brightest minds flee because they see no hope, that's not a sign of strength. That's a sign of systemic failure. That's a country in terminal decline. Meanwhile, inside Russia, the repression keeps tightening. New laws criminalize even calling the war a war instead of a special military operation. Independent media has been shut down or forced to operate from exile. Protesters face years in prison for holding blank signs. The level of control required to keep the population quiet reveals how fragile the regime actually is. Strong governments don't need to terrorize their own citizens. Weak governments do. And let's be clear about what this economic crisis really means. Russia's GDP might show growth on paper, but that growth is entirely artificial. It's driven by war production, tanks, ammunition, weapons that will be destroyed in Ukraine. That's not real economic development. That's consuming your own future. Every ruble spent on artillery shells is a ruble not spent on hospitals, schools, infrastructure, or technology. Economists warn that this war economy cannot be sustained without causing severe long-term damage. Russia is burning through its financial reserves, its equipment stockpiles, its Soviet-era weapons, and its human capital. Sanctions have cut the country off from critical Western technology. Russia can't manufacture advanced semiconductors, precision machinery, or high-tech medical equipment without imported components. Import substitution has failed to fill the gap. The result? Everything from cars to medical devices to industrial equipment is declining in quality. Maintenance becomes harder. Innovation stops. The economy gradually regresses toward older, less efficient technology. This is what isolation costs. This is what happens when you cut yourself off from the global economy and declare war on the system that drives technological progress. From a European perspective, the picture is increasingly clear. Russia is not winning. The war has failed to break Ukraine. It has failed to divide NATO. It has failed to intimidate Europe into submission. Instead, European countries have increased defense spending, reduced dependence on Russian energy, and tightened coordination on sanctions and military aid. The Kremlin's threats ring increasingly hollow. The fall of Assad's regime in Syria dealt another humiliating blow to Russian prestige. Russia invested years and enormous resources propping up Assad, using Syria as proof of its great power status. When that regime collapsed in a matter of days, Moscow could barely respond. Russian military bases in Syria are now vulnerable. Russian influence in the Middle East is cratering. It's yet another sign that Russia is overstretched, overextended, and unable to maintain its commitments. Putin's entire strategy was based on assumptions that have proven completely false. He assumed Ukraine would collapse in days. Ukraine has fought for nearly 3 years and is still standing. He assumed Western unity would fracture within months. NATO has expanded instead. He assumed Europe would freeze without Russian gas. Europe found alternative suppliers. He assumed sanctions would be ineffective. The Russian economy is now in crisis. Every assumption was wrong. And now the cracks inside the Putin system are showing. While opinion polls in authoritarian states must be treated carefully, long-term trends indicate enthusiasm for the war has cooled significantly. Support is highest among older, state-dependent audiences and lowest among younger, urban, educated Russians. The generation that should be building Russia's future wants nothing to do with this war. Putin's regime relies increasingly on patronage networks, security forces, and loyalist elites to maintain control. The aborted Wagner mutiny in 2023 exposed how fragile that control really is. Armed factions and warlords must be constantly managed, bribed, and monitored. That's not a sign of confident leadership. That's a sign of vulnerability. When you fear your own armed men, when you have to constantly watch for internal threats, you are not projecting strength. You are revealing weakness. The more Europe sees Russian casualties, economic strain, domestic repression, and strategic failure, the more the Kremlin's threats lose their power. A state burning through its soldiers at over 1,000 per day, draining its economy into weapons production, driving out its brightest citizens, and relying on terror to control its population is not on a path to victory. It is on a path to long-term decline. It is becoming a cautionary tale of imperial overreach and strategic miscalculation. Tonight, as you watch this, Russian mothers are receiving notifications about sons who will never come home. Russian families are struggling with prices they can barely afford. Russian professionals are booking one-way flights out of the country. And Russian officials know the truth they dare not speak publicly, that this war was a catastrophic mistake that is destroying their country from within. The question is no longer whether Russia is winning. The question is how much more damage Russia will inflict on itself before reality can no longer be denied. How many more soldiers will die? How many more bright minds will flee? How much deeper will the economic crisis become? And when the Russian people finally confront the full scale of what has been done in their name, what will happen then? This is the story the Kremlin doesn't want you to know. This is the reality hidden behind propaganda and censorship. Russia is not strong. Russia is bleeding. And the whole world is watching it happen.